Welcome everyone to this week's edition of the SIG Node meeting. It is December 10th, 2024. We have one item on the agenda, which is the 132 retro. I'm going to share my screen and we can get started. Okay, so here's our retro doc. Before we hop into this, it could be useful to just sort of refresh our memory on how 131 retro went. So if we look at our feedback at the bottom, I think something that we ran into in 131 that was a big sort of takeaway was trying to improve our responsiveness on KEPs and having people responsible for responding to pings and stuff and helping out Usher KEPs. We tried a little to fix with the KEP Wranglers, which we'll talk about in a bit. And let's see, I think the kind of summarizing as we go. If anyone has anything they want to chime in about 131,
yeah, I think big feedback was about finalization of caps, especially with regards to dogs and stuff like that. And we decided we thought we need to have wranglers as well as some better way to track things, better than Google Doc. I think that was feedback from previous retro.
Totally. Yeah. So with that in mind, let's hop over to the 132 retro. So just looking at the summary, I counted, and I wasn't super precise with this doc, so I made some mistakes, and these numbers might be a little bit off. Some folks came in and corrected, and I appreciate that. But looking at this, at least, we had a pretty productive release. Since we've been tracking it, this is on par with the number of merged PRs that we've done before, but a little bit better of a ratio. So that's exciting. And no, this is copied. This number. But let's see. Anyway, but that said, we still we had a very productive season. We could go through some of the highlights, or I'm not sure if we should go one by one or if we should just talk about some of the ways, I'm not sure. Do you have any suggestions on how? I forget how we did it last time.
We don't have that many people on the call, so we probably wouldn't have owners for all the caps, but if somebody wants to speak up about specific cap, let's do it in the beginning before we go into like what can be improved.
I think some highlights that I'm thinking of is there were of the caps that didn't make it, most of them didn't make it at feature enhancement time. Like we were fairly good at committing to working on something and then getting an enhancement in, and then places where it sort of slipped ended up being at the actual implementation step. I think something that I think about is like, for instance, some of these DRA ones, I'm not even sure we even got to implementation steps. So I wonder if better we're working to better plan at the beginning of the season might help us focus our energy a little bit better potentially. But I do I also think it is good to optimistically plan just in case we do have the bandwidth for it.
I think another issue we had was like KubeCon was right after the freeze. So I think folks were kind of distracted preparing for that as well.
Yeah, this was a really tough release generally. And we're kind of jumping into the retro part already, but something like I think that sort of contextualized some of the ways that I think we can improve from this one also. But yeah, let's. Does anyone have any other sort of thoughts you could bring up?
Yeah, if we're switching already to retro, I think I have some thoughts on retro.
Yeah, let's get retrospective.
So one thing for me
go
was bad for this release is that we planned to do a few GAs really quickly in the beginning, but we were blocked by the fact that Kubernetes is switching to emulated version. An emulated version on API server changes the dynamic and how you promote something in GA, because now you need to keep the flag for longer, for 3 more releases. And then there were no real documentation how it exactly will be done. It just like KEP was promoted to beta without documentation, and everybody needed to wait for some clarification from a team doing that KEP.
Totally. Yeah, that's a good point. And so, I mean, luckily, unfortunately, that was, probably just some growing pains with the new feature. Now at least we know sort of better how to handle the emulated feature or emulated version feature. Do you think there's any other takeaways we could bring from that?
I don't know really. I think the only takeaway for me, an action item, is to keep watching what SIG architecture is doing, because there are conversations about LTS, there are conversations about better feature gate tracking and like being able to enable and disable in runtime. All of that will give us attacks on implementation of SIG Node features. It will probably be improvement for many features we're working on, but it's same time it's a big tax, and we need to keep an eye on that.
Totally. Yeah, it's a good shout out. Something that I think we did well here is we had the KEP Wranglers. I thought that I don't know what other folks think, but I think that having people responsible for ushering the KEPs was helpful. I think something that I'm seeing us needing to improve in the future is, and this includes myself because I was helping out with the wrangling process. Basically, once KubeCon happened and enhancements were merged, we all became a little bit less attentive about the next deadlines, and we still had to get reached out to directly by SIG docs and by the release team, getting us to like get the remaining pieces of the feature over the line. So something that I'm taking away from the process is making sure that the Wranglers and also like the SIG generally, like we're really paying attention to the work that we have to do after the release, because that's that's also very important work, and it's easy to sort of lose track of it.
Yeah, I had some thoughts on that one. Generally, I was wondering how we would feel about holding implementation PRs until the web documentation is also complete. Because like really the author of the code should be writing the documentation. And if we're going to revert it, it's kind of, I sort of don't want to, ask people to jump in and try to document code they didn't write.
Yeah, I don't think that we should have had to do that. I don't think that there were that many cases of that happening. But I will say, adding more barriers in the code freeze process could be risky. I think something like what I'm imagining that we do is like basically after code freeze happened, we took a little breath. We were like, that's done. And I'm wondering if maybe instead, once the feature is merged, having folks who are helping out, whether that be regulars or tech chairs or things like that, anyone who's taking on that responsibility within the SIG, like they then go and immediately be go to the authors and say like, okay, you did that, that's great, but we also have these deadlines. This is when it's coming up. This is what you have to do. Like, make sure you do this. It's really important. Your feature might get reverted. So that's sort of what I'm imagining, but I'm open to, suggest. I mean, I do think that having the direct dependency at code freeze time could make it so that we'll make it so that we definitely meet these deadlines. But I just worry about like adding on to the plate of the authors that already, are sort of, it's already a difficult process to get anything merged in the.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I'm not really sure the best way. I tried to do it at least on a couple of the PRs where we had to at least have the draft one. I would put the PRs on hold until those were at least there. Just try to get that deadline. I think I didn't do it for implementation PRs. Because, like, yeah. But I mean, I guess we can do our best.
Yeah, I think what I'm taking away from this as someone who participated in the wrangling process is like, I think we can do that more. Like, I think that was really helpful in the enhancement and the implementation phase, and I think that we sort of and I take responsibility, for not necessarily for wrangling the wranglers, if you will. But the keeping that energy going throughout the entire release so that we actually get the end-to-end, all of the pieces in place and all of the authors. Like, when I reached out to some of the folks who needed to update the docs, like, some people were like, oh, I didn't realize that was the deadline, which, like, obviously that's in part on them, but also in part, if we have people who are directly responsible for keeping track of the deadlines and keeping track of the cycle of the release within the SIG, then that also sort of, I can see a gap in, or I can see a way to improve there for them as well.
Do you feel that project board helped? I think things to go well, project board did a very good job in the beginning, but then I don't think we use it that much in the end.
Yes, and I think that has the same sort of symptoms of, or the same, excuse me, the same cause of the document thing. Like, we were pretty diligent about keeping up with things. I was personally diligent about keeping up with things, and then I'm including myself in that, kind of dropped off after implementation happened, in part due to KEPs, in part to just like, the constant rigmarole of all the work to be done. But I do agree that the project board could have been kept up better after enhancement freeze. Like, there was a number of things I had to catch up on when doing this retro even.
In terms of other things, I think this release we had a lot more. It seems like we had a lot more reverts and a lot of test failures. I don't have any data to back that one up, but it did seem like we had. I mean, we also had quite a large features get merged, and we had to like revert some of them or try to fix them. I know I probably fixed at least 2 or 3 that were failing the CI / also the test infra. One item I was thinking that could help is I think that some of the issues were somebody there's kind of like for some GA features, people were promoting end-to-end tests to GA, but we found out that in beta they were never actually run anywhere. So then we would end up reverting the feature because the end-to-end tests were not actually ever exercised. I saw that happen at least once or twice. We definitely saw a lot of regressions around alpha and beta features. I think that's where the majority of them was for either promoting a alpha feature or even some alpha merges. One item I think could help is that I think there's been some initiative in SIG testing to kind of clean up the labels of our end-to-end tests for ETE node has very different labels from the rest of the org, and starting to try and kind of clean that up and make it a bit more clear, because to be honest, it's confusing to me what we label our tests as.
Yeah. So the action item there would be improve the labels of the tests so that we can better.
There's a
match
cap I
the
linked in the
features.
chat.
Yeah, I started this effort some time ago, but then it went nowhere because I just simply didn't have time. But yeah, appreciate any help on that. And I think it's a very good action item for this release. And I don't think anybody did anything particularly wrong. To your point, I think it's mostly the side effect of significance of features we developed. Even small features were quite big.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I also think, I agree that it would have been better if we didn't have to go through that resort cycle and test fix change. And I also think that in part that's the process working as expected. Like, it's good that we caught it at, test phase. So I think that that's also a representation of the health of the project generally, that we can catch these things then rather than having an even later revert. I think the action item is definitely then to try to pull that as close to merge or pre-merge as possible. Cyrus, you have a couple, we've kind of been dancing around your pieces. Do you want to talk over your 2 points?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah. So you were asking me, Peter, or?
Yeah, I not to call you out, but you left a couple of notes, and we've been adding things, but haven't addressed the things that you added already. So I just wanted to give you the space if you wanted that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think from things that went well, yeah, I think the collaboration worked very well when there were flag tests related with new features. So there was some very good collaboration, and the root cause was found on time. And I like that we had this follow the sun approach. I mean, it helped a lot that a lot of people were finding issues, and then 24/7 we were finding it. I think it was good. And I had one comment for in-place pod vertical scaling. Personally, it took me by surprise, this refactoring of the tests, to be honest. So I lost, so it happened just before the code freeze, and we had these 3 weeks, and then I lost like 1.5 weeks, honestly, to understand the new tests. And I think it would have been better if it was communicated, such a big refactoring, because it was quite big, in my opinion. And we ended up like, how can I say it? Like, so we were testing a feature like for 2 years from 127 with a specific set of tests. And then suddenly we had like only 3 weeks with this refactoring of the test. And it was, I mean, I did an investigation and I found that some things, we lost a lot of, how can I say it? Like having tests working, like being tested with one test code, 1.5 years, and then suddenly we have only 2 weeks. And the pipelines were failing sometimes due to timeouts and a lot of other issues. Yeah, I would prefer this to have been planned a little bit better, like 1 month before, to have the tests, focus on the tests, and then this would be helpful. So that was one comment I think we should learn. And yeah, if tests should be handled also, for sure not 2 weeks before code freeze. We should make it a better planning if it's a big refactoring. That is my comments. And I think with Runal's comment, yeah, I think that KubeConf was right after code freeze. I think it was a little bit tricky because I didn't attend KubeConf, but I noticed that not a lot of people, because they were traveling, they were not available after the code freeze. So I think this a little bit created a small, non-activity for roughly, it was like 1 week. And this, I think it impacted some, some issues that we had. So yeah, I think it might be good to have like a small, like 1 week before code freeze and KubeConf if possible, to ensure that issues directly after code freeze to be seen and fixed. Yeah, but this, I guess it was this year, it ended up to be like this, and there were vacation after, so I guess, yeah, that's all. I don't have any other comments, Peter. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Did anyone have any thoughts on any of those points?
Yeah, I have a question. So I missed the context about the refactoring that Soter is mentioned in the notes. So I would like to learn more where I can read something or know something.
Yeah, I can share with you the commits. I mean, we were testing everything in E2E_node.
Yes.
And then they were moved. So this is a different setup from the E2E /node. So I think so I'm referring to this one. So it was like migration. So suddenly we stopped using it.
The reason I'm asking is because, as far as I know, end-to-end test, end-to-end_node test, they're still the preferred and recommended support and everything. So I'm kinda getting the message that at least for VPA, maybe that was not the preferred approach, and this is why I'm curious about.
Aha, okay, I didn't know that it was a preferred. So that's news to me. So this is even more important than to go back and see why this happened, and then we need to bring it back to end-to-end _node, because I mean,
I would argue with with the fact that it's preferred approach. I don't think it's preferred. It's just different type of tests. E2E node, E2E_node run faster. They run in more contained environment. You can emulate inject failures. So there are lots of benefits. But in E2E/node is useful for conformance. So if you want some APIs to be tested for conformance, it needs to be an E2E/node. So in VPA case, we need both. We need definitely a lot of conformance tests, but also we need some failure injections. I was meeting on this PRs. Like we have very few tests that test edge cases, and I think in pods vertical autoscaling is mostly about edge cases. Like success paths also complicated, but all the trickiness is edge cases.
Yes, but I mean, also there are limitations in the E2N /node. So like, for example, if you want to check all the possible policy options, for example, I give an example, then you cannot do it with the E2E /node. The alternative is to create like hundreds of pipelines to do this, where because it has a limitation where you cannot update, for example, the kubectl config. So, and perhaps this is a good discussion to improve it. I mean, if it has pros and cons, but I think this is a good finding that we should improve our,
I would say
that's the background.
I would say this deserves a follow-up and to clarification to avoid those issues to present again in the future, and of course to streamline further VPA progress. So I think maybe let's follow up and let's clarify when it's preferred to have, or recommended, or best to have in /node, and where in _node, and when we need both. And I mean, doesn't need to be a long essay. It could be just few lines, few agreement, few whatever. I mean, not necessarily a document or whatever is the outcome, but just clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And for my investigation, this 1.5 week, which I was also trying to understand the end-to-end backlog node, I think 90% of the things we can do it and move it there. I mean, I'm saying capabilities that we have with the E2A_node. There is like a 10% which we might need to have a discussion, all of us, and improve this. And then if we have one-to-one, parity, then we can plan to migrate it or do it some. But yeah, +1 to your proposal, Francesco. Sergey, what do you think?
Yeah, alongside with defining labels better, we also need to clarify which test to use when. And I really like how test gets them better and better in this release. In this release, we have CRI failure injections, and we already tested one cap with that. So I'm super excited. But yeah, we need to do work. Action item definitely can be cut out of this conversation.
Awesome. Okay. Does anyone else have anything? I haven't seen any new items being added. Does anyone else have anything they wanted to talk about? Cool. I mean, overall, this was a really productive release. You know, we merged a lot of big features. We merged small features. We made progress on a lot of caps. And obviously, we always have room to improve. But I do also want to acknowledge this is pretty good. So, let's keep up the good work. No one else has anything to talk about on the retro front. We are out of meeting note items. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to talk about in this meeting?
We should probably start looking at the 133 schedule because I know there will be a lot of vacation in December. So.
Yeah, I don't know if they've released it yet. I can check.
I don't think they have, but I was looking at last year. It was enhancements freeze was like early February. So I think we should plan for a similar time frame. So that's what I'm doing with the DRA stuff. We talked about it today in our meeting, and we got a bunch of stuff we want to do, but we'll see how much we can actually spec out and get planned for in that short time frame. Because a lot of us are out for 2 weeks over the Christmas and New Year's holidays.
Right. Yeah, it'll be a crunch to get everything in. So yeah, I think we can assume like early Feb and start working towards that.
Great, but yeah, good shout out. We, it never stops coming, so we do gotta be, stay paying attention. Great. If there's nothing else, then we can adjourn for this week. As a note to everyone, because of the proximity to the holidays and the end of the year and people using up vacation time and stuff, we're going to be more aggressive about canceling SIG Node meetings. So if you have anything you want to talk about next week, make sure to add it early to the agenda. Otherwise, we may cancel from it. And with that, we can sign off. Thanks everyone for joining, and maybe we'll see you next week.
Right. Thanks.
Bye.